Hi, Gavin Huscroft, N3379209, Professional Dance Project, Dance Practice. Basically I teach on the BA Hons Creative Enterprise and I look after acting and directing and the academic tutor for that. One of the things I've discovered over the past few years is that more and more students want to do physical theatre, to investigate it and to become more proficient at it. I have taught physical theatre before, I have been a physical theatre performer and I direct a lot of physical theatre. I was very concerned about the fact that if I created a module or something that was that would run for the 9 months that the BA top-up runs for, it would have to be researched properly, investigated, and I would have to put a rationale, a module guide and scheme work and everything else with it. So this is just an overview of that, to what I would have to introduce the students to, etc. This is an overview of the module aims, which we create a scheme of work that introduces the students to the theatrical style of physical theatre, to give them some historical context of where physical theatre began, where it sits now in the industry. And I started by giving them a timeline of the physical theatre itself. And the idea behind that was to look at, for instance, Grotowski, Arto, Pina Bausch, and then bringing it forward into Berkhoff, because that would relate to the actors who are wanting to do the physical theatre, who aren't dance trained. But I wanted to show them Pina Bausch as well, to show them some contrasts and similarities between what we would term, I suppose, movement for actors and physical theatre. The students were also introduced to the Theatre Lab, the International Physical Theatre Lab, and the University Theatre, and I gave them some images to look at. So going back to the timeline that I introduced to them, I talked about Grotowski and given them some historical context of when he was around, some of the theories of the Poor Theatre and the Polish Laboratory Theatre. I talked about Bausch, Pina Bausch, dance training, Wuppertal, text, song and emotions, feminism obviously and reality. The feminism did tie in nicely as well, looking in diversity, which was good. And I then brought it forward to Berkhoff, who obviously is an actor, a playwright, a theatre director, a performer, and he basically looks at grotesque, Lecoq and mime. He trained with Jacques Lecoq. He was very influenced by Martha Graham. He studied mime and he is fascinated by the body, the movement, the voice, and obsessed with the fact that they should all connect. They should not be disassembled, if you like, of nice speaking voices, or they can move, or they can perform, but it's tying them all together. I showed them Grotowski, Pina Bausch and Berkhoff, and we had little bits of discussions about them. I gave them some background on Grotowski and a quote from him so that they could mull that over and understand and think about it for a while. I gave them 3 quotes from Pina Bausch, bringing their attention mainly to the fact that it's not how they move, as in what moves them, because one thing I didn't want them to do was start moving fluidly but then not have any emotional connection to why they were moving anyway, and what was the emotion behind the movement, and what were they feeling, why were they moving. Berkhoff, a little bit of a quote there as well. He regards his plays as living embodiments of his life, probably because of the fact that first 2 plays are written by him, and he's very shall we say dictatorial, and creates what he likes to say as an ensemble, but he created his own work and he's very passionate about what he does, as I'm sure everyone is. The diversity project I put towards them was that I wanted to use physical theatre to interpret ethnicity, religion, sexuality and gender, and I filmed this as a work in progress. For the project, the students were informed that this work was for my MA, and we went through the usual structure of saying that the work will be protected. Anything they have to say, if they're not happy about anything, they can take that back. And incidentally, some of the students enjoyed working on this and they're looking forward to working on my next research project, which is good as well. Students were introduced to some of the methodology and practice of the 3 practitioners, how I've mentioned earlier, and they were given independent study to research and then present their findings on Grotowski, Pina Bausch and Berkhoff in particular. Discussions began aimed at the theme of diversity, and the work began on how to use the technique and research applying to the theme. In order for them to be able to focus for the few days that we worked on as well, I wanted to make sure that they were physically ready for it. So I introduced them to some very basic Pilates session. We had been running some Pilates sessions alongside the degree, But I sort of brought that back in, and we looked at relaxation, concentration, alignment, breathing, centre, coordination, flow, movements and stamina. I wanted them to be aware of their bodies and what their bodies were capable of, or whether they were too tense, whether they were aware of any pain or issues or problems they may be having. Incidentally, one of the guys did have a car crash a few years ago, and he said that Pilates, and particularly these sessions, have helped to loosen up his back, and he's in considerably less pain and feels that he can actually move better. And he went from thinking that he couldn't really do physical theatre into now believing he really wants to explore it. So something happened there, which is nice. I did the Singer's Pilates exercises, looking at in particular the things that are on the screen there: the starfish, spine curls, oblique curl-ups, resting position, dumb waiter and the chalk circle. Again, it was getting them to sort of release their back, to release their body, and then to really think about, is anything hurting? Have I done the right thing? Have I over pushed? Is my body aching? And really do some investigative work upon themselves. These are some of the images from the Pilates session, obviously starting with the sit bones, which was an interesting conversation because half of them couldn't find them. But sit bones, beginning of the Pilates session. Here are some other photographs. And Pilates continued there. The aim was to learn how to recognise and release areas of unwanted tension within their body before beginning to work with the body in physicality. I often find as actors we have a terrible tendency, and I've done it a lot of my life, and it's been done to me, where we come in, a little bit of a warm-up that you do yourself, and then, which is not always that great compared to dancers, and then you end up doing a lot of physical stuff, running around, games, vocalization, using the voice, throwing yourself around, and you dive into the work. And what I was trying to get them to look at is the fact that there is a more methodical, easier, clearer and precise way of getting your body working without doing this high intensity and running around, if you like. And I wanted the actor to be aware of the tension and how to release it and to listen to the body. I introduced them to elements of Laban, particularly looking at flow, space, time and weight. I didn't focus too heavily on Laban because they had studied this before, and they had some clear idea of what the techniques were, and I didn't want to focus on that. I wanted to focus more on physical theatre rather than this particular technique, and I wanted them to express themselves rather than trying to emulate something else that they'd done in a past work on foundation degree. I made them look at or discuss the fact that they should look at space, time and weight, and I interpreted that for them. This went up on a whiteboard in the studio. What direction do you move? Is it direct or indirect? Time. What speed do you move? Is it fast or slow or both? Is it rhythm, continuum movement in the space? Weight. Particularly with weight, I kind of linked that in very loosely to biomechanics and being aware of where their body's weight mass was moving as they were actioning physicality. What I then got them to look at was Grotowski, and in particular I wanted them to apply what we just talked about there. And so this is an extract from Grotowski, using flow and movement and weight. And this is training at Grotowski's laboratorium in 1972. So the students looked at this and they were very aware of the fact I was trying to say to them, you know, how do you use the space? How do you move within the space? What is your body doing? What is, tension, release, flow, and everything else. So that video is there for if you'd like to watch any more of it, and that's basically was shown to the students so they could look at it and interpret what was actually happening. Oh. Right. The student watched the extract and began to experiment with the movement, and this focused the student on the task in hand and helped them to explore the body's potential and what it can actually do within the space. So particularly just with hand movements, I was getting them to look at pressing or wriggling or gliding within the space, floating, etc., etc. Then I got them to move that process throughout their whole body, so they were looking at pressing with their bodies, pressing through the air, wriggling, gliding, floating, etc. And it said that it gave them a better idea of what they could do actually with their bodies, and thinking just as key words. If anything, it kind of triggered them to move. I looked at Pina Bausch to dance enabling performer to free themselves from the narrative and constrictions of text. so that they didn't get bogged down with, there has to be a narrative, there has to be a linear structure, there has to be text involved with this. Incidentally, as much as I pushed, they never really created any sound when they did the physical piece, which was quite interesting. And again, I think it's because they were centering so much on the physicality of what it was that they were doing. I then showed them some extracts, or showed them to the director of the Pina Bausch, and I got them to look at the vast amount of YouTube available for them to focus on. And they then went off and picked different ones, because I wanted them to understand a little bit about Pina Bausch, because she was somebody I wasn't really aware of as an actor-performer. Sadly to say, I was more steeped in Grotowski and Artaud and Jacques Lecoq and Berkoff and various others. So it was really interesting getting them to look at this so they could see the similarities between dance practitioners, physical theatre, and realise that the boundaries between physical theatre, acting, physical theatre, dance isn't really there. It's just physical theatre, it's movement, it's body movement basically. And I wanted them to not have any hang-ups or kind of try and pigeonhole things. Soon watched Pina Bausch, as I've just said. They picked their extracts. This was then discussed in the context of independent research, because they were looking at it themselves, because I wanted them to have a journey with it rather than me just giving them, spoon-feeding them, if you like. We then started to layer some of this on the diversity theme and began to work on the pieces themselves. What I found interesting was that I got them to work separately and again allowed them to decide what areas they were going to cover. So in one extract, this is actually, the students worked separately and they created little pieces. One looked at ethnicity and, sort of getting to know each other, working with each other. This is an ethnicity bit where they are working in unison. They're one area of or village in life, if you like. And the guy on the right who's standing separately comes into them. He's different. He has a different ethnicity. And so he then has to either work with them or they work with him, or can we all work together? So they were exploring that potential of the different person, if you like. And that was created separately by themselves. The other student one, which was the the version created by the two guys, this is Rosie, Jordan and Andrew, and they were looking more, I suppose, to a point at religion, and they were looking at religion in particular, with a girl wanting to study because they started talking about that, and the community stopping her from study because she was a girl. I know that's inferring quite stereotypically to certain areas, but it was interesting what they came up with and how they interpreted this, blocking her, allowing her to move around. It wasn't very fluid, it was a bit static, but it was their attempt. What we then moved into is where I had a little bit more control over this and decided to add music, so it was less their independent creativeness, and this was me working with them more intensely. And they decided that the theme they wanted to look at was conflict and sexuality and gender. And so trying to get them to move a little bit better, really applying the practitioners and trying to stop that rigidity or that stiffness, if you like, and trying to make them flow. I found with the music it was very interesting that it did actually make them flow better. They did actually use the space better and applied techniques better. And they seemed to get a lot braver as well at what they were doing. What I then moved into was to bring them all together and to put the separate scenes into one big space to see if I could use the space in a better way and create a form of physicality and physical theatre. So the next extract is basically, actually we've got a dance context stage 3, which basically is the next phase on. So they've worked separately, they're now all working together, and you can see I've put the scenes all in the same space and got them to move so that it became a performance piece. And then we worked on this for a while, which you can watch in your own time. The strength of these three actually really did work. It drew your focus in quite a lot. And then there's another extract again, which is just a rerun Dancing Context Stage 2. And it was just a case of putting it all together again from different angles. And that's available to watch. So back to the presentation. We'd again, during the process of that, we looked at Birkhoff and again used the same process. And I think that's why in some ways the walking and the jerky walking things happened, because that related a little bit to Salome, where Birkhoff created a piece that all of the performers, apart from John the Baptist, were all in slow motion. They were almost balletic in the way that they moved. They had very stylized movements, speaking, voice, etc. And the only one that was in normal time, if you like, was John the Baptist. So he made them look like the bourgeoisie, sophisticated, over the top, and made them look stupid, which is exactly what he wanted to do in Birkhoff's version of Salome, which is Oscar Wilde's, based on Oscar Wilde's play. So the Diversity Project, as you've already seen some extracts from there, is available on the links. So in conclusion, I believe that I demonstrated some idea of a comprehensive process used alongside the practitioner's methodology. I introduced pedagogy into it so that they had a structure and a timeline, and they had methods to play with, and it was structured so that they could actually do some independent research. I believe the work is produced to a reasonable standard, to a good standard, and I believe that underpinned the application of the technique taught. All ethical issues regarding students were approached using the current college policies and procedures that are in place where I work. There was no learning support needs at all, and there was no physical problems within my current cohort. And the room itself is health and safety checked, etc., ready to be used. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation. Thank you very much.